Beneath the calm, the ocean hides its deadliest secrets. Survival hinges on quick thinking, unbreakable bonds, and the instinct to fight when the world turns against you. The line between predator and prey blurs in these harrowing tales, leaving nothing but raw terror and the will to survive. Brace yourself. Nature's fury is about to unfold. Peter had been fishing the waters of Gansbai for over 20 years. His hands were calloused, his face weathered by salt and sun, but his eyes, sharp and alert, had seen it all. He was out on his boat one calm morning, lines cast out, waiting for the tug of a yellowtail tuna. The sea, however, had other plans. The strike was powerful, a deep, steady pull. Peter's first thought was tuna, but as he reeled in, the tension grew stronger. It was no tuna. Something bigger, something far more dangerous. A young great white shark had taken the bait, thrashing at the end of the line, desperate to escape. The fight was longer than expected. His boat creaked as he worked the shark closer, gritting his teeth against the effort. Once he had it alongside, Peter, knowing the danger of such creatures, quickly radioed for help. The marine authorities needed to deal with this. They had a protocol for handling shark captures, even accidental ones. The authorities arrived quickly, and the shark was brought aboard for examination. As they cut it open to check the stomach contents, a grim discovery was made. A human arm, partially decomposed but still identifiable, emerged from the stomach. A forearm, its skin pale and mottled, held a tattoo. A woman's tattoo. It was a delicate design, one with intricate details, clearly distinct. The tattoo matched that of a missing Belgian tourist, a young woman who had last been seen partying on the local beach. She had vanished 2 weeks ago, and her disappearance was the subject of intense local gossip. Her friends had thought she had fallen from the cliffs or drowned. Some whispered that she had simply left in search of something more. No one had imagined she'd meet such a grisly end. The authorities initially presumed it to be a tragic accident. The shark, they believed, had found the body in the sea and consumed it, scavenging the remains of a drowned woman. But there were questions. Why was there no water in her lungs? How had she drowned if she hadn't inhaled water? The coroner's report came back shocking. Bruising consistent with strangulation marked her neck. Someone had killed her before the shark ever had a chance. The investigation shifted. Police began looking into the possibility of homicide. The beach party was revisited and the woman's friends were questioned. No one had seen anything suspicious that night. But something about the quiet coastal town didn't sit right with Peter. The discovery of the body, so close to his catch, had uncovered something darker than a simple shark attack. It had exposed a predator closer to home, lurking in the shadows of their peaceful town. As the case unfolded, Peter couldn't shake the weight of his accidental catch. The shark had not been the true predator here. It was an eerie thought, one that gnawed at him long after the authorities had taken the body away. His simple, routine fishing trip had turned into something far more sinister. Gansbai, known for its tranquil waters and rich fishing grounds, was forever changed. As the police continued their investigation, more unsettling details began to surface. The missing Belgian woman wasn't the first to disappear, though her case had been the most mysterious. Other women, in various stages of life, had gone missing over the years. Some found days later, some never found at all. Peter had always loved the sea, but the water felt different now. It felt as though it held secrets, dark and terrifying. As he continued to fish, the ocean, once familiar and comforting, seemed to hold its breath, watching and waiting. He couldn't escape the feeling that something was watching him. The guilt weighed on him too. If he hadn't caught that shark, if he hadn't unknowingly dragged it to the surface, would the woman's death have remained a mystery? Would the killer still be free, continuing their dark work under the cover of the night? Peter questioned everything, from the safety of the waters to the people he'd grown up with. Some of him had hoped for a clean, simple catch that morning, a yellow-tailed tuna to add to his day's haul. But fate had handed him something far more dangerous that would unravel the calm surface of his life. As the investigation deepened, the town's sense of security eroded. Locals began whispering about the killer who had evaded the authorities for so long and the killer's connection to the sea. Some, like Peter, couldn't help but think of the sharks. Had they been mere witnesses to a crime, or was there something more sinister at play? Something that lived in the deep waters and the darkest corners of the town. Weeks later, the town's beaches remained quiet, and the tourists slowly returned, unaware of the shadow that had fallen over the peaceful village. The sea, calm as ever, carried its secrets beneath the surface. Peter, The fisherman, who had unknowingly opened the door to a horrifying discovery, could only wonder what lurked in those dark, silent depths. As for the authorities, they still hadn't uncovered the truth. They hadn't found the killer, and the case, though under investigation, seemed to stall at every turn. But in the back of Peter's mind, he knew. He knew the darker truth was out there, waiting, just like the great white that had opened its jaws that morning, waiting and watching. The beach resort in Mexico had a reputation for luxury and privacy. Jordan and Mia had been planning their honeymoon for months, choosing this secluded spot for the perfect combination of romance and adventure. After lounging by the pool and savoring gourmet meals, they decided to sneak away from the resort's crowded areas for a midnight swim. The moon hung high, casting a soft glow over the water. The beach was quiet, with a peaceful sound of waves crashing gently against the shore and filling the air. Jordan, a tall man with a wiry frame, was in his early 30s and an office worker by trade. But on this trip, he'd felt the pull of freedom. Mia, his wife of only a few days, was the opposite. Energetic and carefree, with an easy smile and a love for the spontaneous. She had always loved water, whether it was swimming or simply floating. The ocean was home for her, where the world's weight seemed to vanish. The warm water wrapped around their legs as they stepped into the surf. They held hands, laughing softly at the thrill of being out under the stars with no one around. The resort was tucked away behind a rocky outcrop, far enough to be nearly invisible in the dark. The only light came from the moon and the faint glow of distant resort lights. Mia whispered that she loved the moment and suggested they make it a yearly tradition. Jordan smiled at the idea, but noted they might eventually run out of places to explore. They waded further into the water, enjoying the feeling of the waves lifting them up and down. The world around them was silent except for the rhythmic sound of the ocean. Jordan looked over at Mia, her silhouette outlined by the moonlight. She was floating on her back, her face tilted to the sky, eyes closed, utterly relaxed. Then, the water around them shifted. Jordan's eyes darted toward the faint ripples cutting through the water. At first, he thought nothing of it. A fish, perhaps, or some other harmless creature. But then it happened again. A disturbance in the water, larger this time. Mia felt it first. She kicked her legs to propel herself further from the shore, but she heard a sharp splash the moment she did. The sound echoed through the still night, followed by a shrill, desperate scream. Jordan's heart pounded as he saw Mia thrashing in the water, her arms flailing wildly. Something had her, something large. He didn't hesitate. He pushed through the water toward her, the darkness around them making it impossible to see what had taken hold of her. Her scream pierced the air again, a gut-wrenching sound that tore through his chest. His voice cracked with fear as he shouted her name and reached her in seconds, grabbing her with frantic hands. But then he froze, just for a moment. A tiger shark had latched onto her right leg, its blood-stained teeth sunk deep into her flesh. Mia's body convulsed violently as the predator held firm. Jordan's instinct kicked in. He pulled her as hard as he could, trying to break the shark's grip. Mia's leg was bleeding heavily, her body spasming with pain. The shark, sensing the struggle, didn't release its grip. It thrashed again, its body rippling in the water like a dark shadow in the moonlight. Jordan fought to free her, his hands desperately prying at the shark's jaws. He slammed his fist against its nose, a blow that did little to stop the creature but distracted it long enough to break its grip. Blood spilled into the water around them, turning it a dark, unsettling red. Mia's body was weakening and Jordan could feel her slipping away. He punched the shark again, this time with more force. The shark released a low, guttural growl, its body jerking. Finally, after an eternity, the shark released its hold. Mia's leg was a mangled mess, her flesh torn and raw. With all his strength, Jordan pulled her back toward the shore. Her body felt limp, her breathing shallow. Blood stained the water around them, and Jordan's mind raced with thoughts of how much time they had before the shark would come back. They reached the beach, but the situation was far from over. Mia collapsed in the sand, her face pale, her eyes unfocused. She was losing consciousness quickly, and Jordan had no idea how long it would take for help to arrive. He looked around in a panic, but the beach was deserted. There were no lights and no one to help. The resort was far off, too far for him to return for help. His thoughts raced as he tried to think of anything that could stop the bleeding. Jordan scrambled, grabbing beach towels and folding them over Mia's leg. He pressed down hard, trying to staunch the bleeding, but the blood wouldn't stop. His hands trembled. both from fear and from the overwhelming sense of helplessness that gripped him. He had no phone, no way of calling for help. The resort's beach was deserted this late at night, and the nearest building was a distant silhouette in the dark. Time was running out, and Jordan had no choice but to sprint. Barefoot, he dashed across the hot sand, his heart pounding. His mind raced through every option, but there was nothing. He needed help, now. Finally, after what felt like forever, he reached the resort's reception area. The lights were still on, but the place was eerily quiet. He banged on the door, screaming for someone to open it. Still in her uniform, the receptionist appeared startled as she rushed to unlock the door. Jordan's voice was frantic as he rushed toward the others, shouting about the attack. A shark had badly hurt Mia, and they needed to call for help immediately. The receptionist wasted no time, immediately dialing the emergency number and giving the details. Jordan barely remembered anything after that. The world blurred, and his mind stayed fixed on one thing. Mia's life was hanging in the balance. By the time paramedics arrived, Mia had lost too much blood. She was rushed into surgery as Jordan clung to the hope that she would survive. The incident made headlines the next day. A shark attack on a honeymooning couple, and the resort was forced into the spotlight. It quickly emerged that the hotel had been illegally dumping fish waste off the coast, which had attracted large predators like tiger sharks. The media storm followed, and the resort faced intense scrutiny. But for Jordan and Mia, the real storm was within. The trauma of the attack had scarred them in ways they didn't fully understand. Their honeymoon was supposed to be a dream, but it had become a nightmare. As Mia recovered in the hospital, her leg would heal with time. But the emotional scars, the terror of that night in the water, would stay with them forever. They had both been through something that tested their love and reshaped their lives, and no matter how many years passed, the haunting memory of that midnight swim would never truly fade. The small fishing village of Recife, Brazil, was known for its vibrant culture, colorful markets, and stunning coastline, but it was simply home to Camila and Sofia, two teenage sisters. Both had grown up near the water, spending countless days swimming in the warm Atlantic Ocean and laughing with friends along the beaches. They knew the sea, its moods, its currents, its dangers. But this evening, as they leapt from the crumbling jetty into the dusky water, they didn't give the ocean's dangers a second thought. The sun began to set, the sky painted orange and pink, casting a peaceful glow across the horizon. The water beneath them was calm, its surface reflecting the light in ripples. As they swam out, the village fishermen shouted from the shore, their voices carrying across the water. They called out urgently to the girls, warning them to come in. Dusk was hunting hour. It was no time to be in the water. Camila and Sofia laughed, dismissing the warning. It was just the men being overly cautious, as they always were. The two sisters had grown up near the ocean and swum these waters countless times without incident. They were confident, carefree, and oblivious to the growing danger beneath the surface. The further they swam, the more the shore seemed to fade into the distance. The water deepened, its color darkening as the sun dipped lower in the sky. Sofia, the younger of the two, had always been the more adventurous. Her wild energy was contagious, and Camila had followed her lead without hesitation. They didn't notice how the ocean had grown quieter, as if holding its breath, waiting for something. It was then that the water splashed violently. Camila felt a sudden jolt beneath her feet. Before she could react, a terrifying screech filled the air. The sound was high-pitched, desperate, a scream that didn't belong to the ocean. It was Camila's. Sofia turned just in time to see her sister's body jerk violently beneath the surface. The silhouette of a fish emerged from the water, its dorsal fin cutting the waves as it charged toward Camila. The bull shark's jaws locked onto her sister's torso, dragging her under with terrifying force. Panic surged through Sofia's chest. She screamed her sister's name, but the sound was swallowed by the crashing waves and the distant voices of the fishermen on shore, unaware of the chaos unfolding beyond their reach. Sofia's heart pounded in her ears as she swam desperately toward Camila, reaching for her sister's arm, her fingers grazing the slick surface of her skin. The shark was relentless, twisting and thrashing in the water. Its razor-sharp teeth sunk deep into Camila's flesh. Sofia's breath caught in her throat as she tried to pull her sister free, but the shark's power was overwhelming. Camila's body was dragged further down, her screams bubbling to the surface, muffled by the water around them. Sofia's arms burned as she fought against the ocean's current, struggling to hold on to her sister. But Camilla was ripped from her grasp with every violent thrash of the shark. The water turned a dark, ominous shade of red as blood from Camilla's wound spread across the surface, staining the once peaceful ocean with a horrifying reminder of the predator lurking beneath. Sophia's mind raced with fear and helplessness. She tried again, reaching down with all her strength to pull Camilla back. But the shark's ferocity was too much. The creature's massive body was a blur of muscle and teeth, ripping through the water easily, dragging Camilla further and further from her. It was then that the fishermen on the shore reacted. They had seen the flash of the shark's dorsal fin cutting through the water and immediately knew what was happening. They shouted, urging Sophia to swim back, but the panic in her chest kept her frozen, unable to let go of her sister. The shark was too powerful, too fast. One of the fishermen jumped into a boat and powered the engine, racing toward the two girls. The others followed in smaller boats, their faces tight with fear and determination. Sophia continued to struggle, her arms aching with exhaustion as she desperately tried to pull Camilla back to safety. But then, with a final bone-rattling tug, the shark yanked Camilla completely under, dragging her down into the depths. The water around Sophia turned redder, the color deepening until it became impossible to see through the blood-soaked waves. Sophia felt her heart shatter. The moment her sister was ripped away from her, a deep, hollow emptiness filled the space where her hope had been. She was alone. The fisherman reached her moments later, pulling Sophia into the boat and hauling her to safety. She collapsed, gasping for air, her body trembling from shock. She didn't speak, couldn't talk. The images of her sister's body being dragged beneath the waves replayed in her mind over and over again, a nightmare that wouldn't stop. The village was in chaos when they returned to shore. The fishermen, who had seen death in the ocean before, were pale with horror. They had witnessed the attack, but there had been nothing they could do. The shark had been too fast, too powerful. The sea had claimed Camilla, and there was nothing anyone could do to change that. Sophia was in a daze. She didn't understand what had happened, how it had all gone so wrong. Once a place of joy and freedom, the jetty felt like a tombstone. It loomed over the water, a silent reminder of the brutality that the ocean could unleash without warning. The police arrived later, their presence only adding to the heavy tension in the village. They questioned the fishermen and Sophia, but their investigation soon ended. There was no way to track the shark that had taken Camilla, and no one had seen anything beyond the brief chaos of the attack. The village was left to mourn in silence. For Sophia, the grief was overwhelming. She could barely bring herself to leave the house, haunted by the sound of her sister's scream echoing in her mind. She blamed herself for not being able to save Camilla, for not pulling her out of the shark's grasp. The guilt gnawed at her daily, a constant reminder that she had failed the one person who had always been there for her. Sophia would never forget that scream, the sound of her sister being torn away from her. It would stay with her forever, an unshakable reminder that the ocean, for all its beauty, held a deep and terrifying power. The calm waters of Cape Cod were deceptive. To those on the surface, the ocean appeared peaceful, with a gentle swell lapping at the hull of the U.S. Coast Guard cutter. But beneath, unseen by the crew, lurked dangers. The cutter had been dispatched to assist a stranded sailboat, tangled in lobster traps far from shore. It was a routine call, but this would be anything but routine for Petty Officer Jenna Morales. Jenna had been on the job for 5 years, experienced and steady. The Coast Guard team, led by Lieutenant Carl Simmons, had a system for these rescues. It was simple: go in, assess, and help free the boat. But when the sailboat had become caught in the maze of lobster traps, they had to send a diver down to untangle the mess. That diver was Jenna. The cutter's crew stood on the deck watching as she descended into the cold, murky water. Visibility was poor, with only a few feet of the ocean floor visible through the gloom. Jenna gripped her tool bag tightly as the ropes dropped, her heart steadying with each foot she sank deeper. She didn't mind the dark. It was part of the job, and after years of training, she knew exactly what to expect. The salty water stung her face as she sank deeper, the waves slowly pulling her away from the surface. Her job was simple: cut the lines, free the sailboat, and get back on the cutter before the situation could escalate. She had done it countless times before, but today was different. The deeper she went, the more the water felt alive, as if it were shifting around her. The swaying motion of the ocean's currents, combined with the low visibility, made her feel small, as though she were part of something much larger and more ominous than she had expected. She concentrated on the ropes before her, her gloved hands expertly working to cut through the tangled mess. Then she felt it. A sudden jolt shot through her body, causing her heart to race. It wasn't the movement of the water. It was something solid, something big. She instinctively glanced over her shoulder, but the water around her was empty, dark. Jenna's stomach tightened. Something was circling and she couldn't see it. She reached for the next rope, trying to keep her focus. But before she could move, the shadow reappeared swiftly beneath her. This time it was unmistakable, a shape far larger than any fish she had encountered. The shark came from nowhere, slamming into her leg with crushing force. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs. Momentarily, she couldn't comprehend what had happened. Pain shot up her leg as the creature's immense strength drove her into the hull of the sailboat. It was a great white, her mind screamed, her training kicking in even as her body panicked. The shark's rough skin scraped her leg as it twisted away, its jaws snapping just inches from her. She could hear the click of its teeth, the sound of the predator sizing her up, preparing for another strike. The cold water felt thick around her as she tried to make sense of her situation. The boat's hull loomed above her, but there was no escape. She had to stay calm and think. She reached down and touched her leg, feeling the warmth of her blood seeping from the deep gash. The sharp pain sent a wave of nausea through her stomach. Her leg was bleeding fast, and the wound was already swelling. She tried to push herself off the sailboat, but the sea didn't let her. The shark circled below, an unrelenting reminder of nature's raw power. Panic began to set in. She was alone down here, vulnerable. The surface seemed miles away, and the team on the cutter was too far to help. Her breathing quickened. Her only option was to stay afloat long enough to be pulled back up. She could hear the voices of her team above, shouting for her, but the sea swallowed the sounds, leaving only the roar of her pulse in her ears. Then it came again. The shark's body surged from beneath her, slamming into her with brutal force. Jenna was knocked sideways, her shoulder slamming into the hull as the shark raked its teeth across her leg. This time she didn't get away. The pain was intense, and she couldn't help but cry out, her body struggling to stay upright. She was losing blood fast, and if she couldn't break free, she would drown. Or worse, she would be dragged under. Her instincts kicked in. She reached for the heavy cutting tool on her belt, its weight comforting her hand. She had been trained to handle this, to face dangers in the water and come out alive. She didn't know how long she had, but she had to act. With a surge of adrenaline, Jenna gripped the cutting tool and swung it downward, missing the shark by mere inches as it circled again, ready to strike. Her hands were slick with blood and seawater, making the grip on her tool slippery. But she wasn't about to give up. With a desperate, panicked motion, she thrust the cutting tool toward the shadow that loomed below her. She didn't know if she hit it, but the shark veered off, vanishing into the murky depths. Jenna gasped for breath, trying to steady herself. She couldn't tell if the shark was still nearby. Every instinct in her told her to swim upward, to get back to the boat before it returned for another attack. The blood from her leg streamed into the water, turning the once clear ocean into a cloud of red. She didn't have much time. Jenna kicked upward, pushing herself toward the surface using her little strength. Her leg burned, the gash tearing with every movement, but she didn't stop. The boat was close, so close. She could hear her teammates shouting her name, and she could see the shadow of the cutter looming above. And then, just as she was about to break through the surface, the shark reappeared, coming from beneath her like a freight train. The great white's body surged upward, its jaws snapping dangerously close to her. But just as quickly, the boat crew hauled her up, pulling her to safety. The shark circled below, still hungry, but it retreated into the depths as the cutter's crew reeled Jenna aboard. The team worked quickly, applying a tourniquet to her leg, keeping her conscious as they rushed her to the medical bay. The shark was gone, but the danger had been real. Jenna had survived, but whether the Coast Guard should continue sending divers into shark-infested waters was debatable. The incident would spark conversations about safety protocols and the risks of diving in such dangerous conditions in the coming weeks. For Jenna, the battle was over, but the scars, both physical and emotional, would stay with her forever. As the team sailed back to the shore, the once peaceful sea seemed far more treacherous. False Bay, a sprawling stretch of ocean off the southern coast of South Africa, was known for its crystal-clear waters and rich marine life. For years, cage diving operators had brought tourists worldwide to witness the awe-inspiring presence of great white sharks. The thrill of watching these apex predators up close was unmatched, But Sizwe had a gut feeling that something wasn't right on this particular day. Sizwe had been running his cage diving business in False Bay for nearly a decade, and he knew the risks. His team followed all the necessary safety protocols. The cages were reinforced, the tourists were briefed, and the boat constantly communicated with the divers. They had seen their fair share of excitement, but today would be different. The Sea Venture boat was anchored a few hundred yards from Seal Island, where the great whites like to hunt. The tourists, eager for their first glimpse of the sharks, huddled in the cage, their faces pressed against the bars, eyes wide with excitement. Sizwe had just finished securing the cage to the boat and was about to check in with his crew when a scream broke through the air. It was one of the tourists. Sizwe spun around, his heart skipping a beat. A woman, pale and contorted in fear, was waving her arms frantically. She had cut her hand on the cage. The blood, red and fresh, began to stain the water below. Sizwe's instincts kicked in, and he quickly ordered his crew to return the cage to the boat. But it was too late. The blood in the water had already done its work. The great white sharks, attracted by the scent, began circling in the distance. The first shark appeared, its dorsal fin cutting through the water like a knife. It moved with purpose, its eyes fixed on the blood. A second one followed, then a third. Sizwe's pulse quickened. 3 great whites. He had never seen them this close before and knew things could get dangerous quickly. The sharks were circling faster now, sensing the frenzy. They were close. Too close. The tourists in the cage were initially oblivious to the danger, their eyes still wide with wonder. But as the first shark slammed into the side of the cage, the reality of the situation set in. The metal cage groaned, the sharks testing it with terrifying force. The tourists screamed, their panic palpable, as the sharks smashed into the bars with a violent force that rattled the cage. Sizwe's mind raced. He had dealt with excited tourists before, but this was different. This wasn't the usual curious behavior. These sharks were angry, hungry even. The blood from the woman's cut had ignited their feeding instincts. The sharks were circling faster now, their movements erratic as they continued to slam into the cage. One shark, its body so large it seemed to fill the water around it, darted forward, its jaws snapping inches from the bars. Sizwe could see the sickening teeth, the dark, empty eyes. The shark was relentless. The cage shuddered again, and Sizwe knew they had to act fast. He signaled to his crew, but there was no way to get the tourists back into the boat without securing the cage. The sharks weren't giving them any room. If they tried to move the cage now, they risked having one of the sharks break through the bars. The tension was unbearable. Sizwe wasted no time. He grabbed his scuba gear and quickly donned it, knowing he would have to enter the water to reinforce the cage. His crew looked at him with unease, but they trusted him. He had been doing this long enough to know the risks, and he had always handled them with calm precision. With a deep breath, Sizwe slipped into the water, his body sinking into the cool depths. The ocean was eerily calm beneath the surface, starkly contrasting with the chaos above. As he descended, he could see the cage still swaying with the movements of the sharks above. The blood in the water made it hard to see clearly, but Sizwe had no time to waste. He reached the cage and began his work. He had to act quickly. The sharks were still circling, their eyes gleaming as they seemed to sense the tension. They were becoming more aggressive now, their movements sharper and faster. He grabbed a long pole to hold the cage steady as he tried to secure the metal bars from the outside. The water around him churned, and he could hear the shark's jaws snapping close to his position. Suddenly, one of the sharks, a great white, lunged at the cage. It was too fast for Sizwe to react in time. With a deafening crash, the shark's body wedged itself halfway into the cage, its enormous jaws snapping inches from the terrified tourists. Sizwe's heart pounded in his chest as the cage groaned under the pressure, the shark struggling to push itself inside. Time seemed to slow. Sizwe's mind raced as he thought about how to get the shark out. He knew he had only moments before the shark would break through completely. With every ounce of strength he had left, Sizwe pushed against the metal bars, trying to hold the shark back. His hand slipped on the slippery pole, but he couldn't afford to lose his grip. Finally, with a violent shake, the shark retreated, its body sliding back into the water as it swam away, frustrated. The tourists inside the cage were still screaming, their faces pale with terror. The sharks continued to circle, but for the moment, the immediate danger had passed. Sizwe signaled the crew above, urging them to pull the tourists back into the boat. Sizwe could feel the moment's wait as the cage was slowly raised. The sharks had backed off, but there was no mistaking that they had come dangerously close to a full-scale attack. When the tourists were safely back on board, Sizwe followed them up, his heart still racing. He could hear the relief in their voices as they thanked him for his quick thinking, but deep down he couldn't shake the feeling of guilt that gnawed at him. He had pushed the limits for the thrill of his business. Today it had almost cost lives. The sea venture returned to the harbor, the sun setting behind them. The sharks had dispersed, but the danger was far from over. For Sizwe, the nightmare would linger long after they had docked. He couldn't help but wonder whether the price of excitement was higher than he had ever imagined. The sun hung low over the Pacific, casting a golden glow over the calm waters of Hawaii's coast. 4 co-workers, eager to escape the corporate grind, boarded a chartered boat for a team-building snorkeling trip. The captain, a weathered man with a tanned face and weathered hands, had dropped them off near a vibrant reef. He would be gone for an hour to refuel, leaving the group to enjoy the beauty of the underwater world. Amber, the most nervous of the group, clutched her mask as she gingerly dipped into the water. Behind her, Ben, Michael, and Claire followed, their laughter echoing across the water. It was supposed to be a relaxing escape from their tight office schedules, a day to bond and unwind. But Amber's unease had always been there, a quiet feeling of discomfort whenever she was in deep water. They swam together, floating in the crystal-clear waters, surrounded by colorful fish and the tranquil hum of the ocean. Amber tried to shake off the tightness in her chest, forcing herself to focus on the beauty around her. But then something caught her eye. A dark fin cutting through the water's surface. Her breath caught in her throat. It was large, too large to belong to a dolphin. Panic crept into her veins. The others, oblivious to her growing fear, continued to explore the reef. She kept her gaze fixed on the fin, her mind struggling to process what she saw. She tried to convince herself the shark was harmless, but the fin wasn't moving in a casual swimming pattern. It was circling, slowly. Amber's heart thudded against her ribs. She waved her arms frantically, trying to get the others' attention. They didn't hear her. Her voice seemed muffled beneath the water, as if the ocean swallowed her panic. Then the fin disappeared. Amber's breath quickened and she twisted to search the water around her. A shadow moved beneath the surface, a long, menacing shape. Her blood ran cold. She could see it now, an oceanic white-tipped shark. Its eyes were dark and unblinking, and it headed straight for her group. She tried to scream, but the crashing waves around them drowned her voice. Her mind raced. Should she shout? Should she swim to the boat? But the shark was already too close. It circled, its body swaying beneath the surface, its movements deliberate. The others still didn't notice. Amber's panic was palpable. She scrambled to get closer to the group, but as she moved, the shark's fin cut across the water again, closer now. Amber froze. It was directly beneath her. She didn't dare move. A flash of silver and the shark struck. The ocean swallowed Amber's scream as the shark latched onto her leg, its sharp teeth sinking into her flesh. The pain was instant, a deep, searing agony. She kicked and thrashed, trying to break free, but the shark had its grip. The water turned murky with blood and Amber's vision blurred. Ben saw the movement first, his eyes widening in horror as Amber's body jerked with the force of the shark's attack. Without thinking, he dove toward her, his arms outstretched to pull her away. The shark didn't release its grip, its teeth still embedded in Amber's leg. But Ben managed to grab her and, using all his strength, wrenched her free. They both went under, submerged for a moment. The shark circled, its cold, calculating eyes following them. Ben, holding Amber tightly, kicked furiously to reach the surface. He couldn't afford to lose her now. She was losing too much blood. She was slipping into shock. Michael and Claire, hearing the chaos, finally turned toward them. They saw the shark, the water turning red around Amber's leg. The terror on their faces mirrored Amber's. Ben hauled Amber to the surface, holding her steady as the shark circled beneath them. He could feel her body growing limp, her blood staining the water. Claire grabbed the beach towels, applying pressure to Amber's wound as Michael swam toward the ship for help. The shark lingered below them, circling in the deep. Time seemed to stretch on forever. The minutes felt like hours as Ben fought to keep Amber conscious. The shark's dark form lurking beneath them seemed to grow more impatient. With every splash and movement, it was drawn to their fear, the scent of blood that lingered in the water. Finally, Michael returned, the captain close behind. The boat came into view and Ben could almost taste the relief in the air. Amber was hoisted onto the ship, Claire by her side, frantic but determined. The captain took over, issuing orders as he rushed to get them back to shore. Amber was rushed to the hospital, her life hanging by a thread. Her wound was severe, but thanks to the quick action of her team, she survived. The shark attack made headlines. But it wasn't just the trauma of the attack that weighed on Amber's mind. It was the pact her group had made to survive. In the face of terror, they had chosen to stay together, to fight for one another. And in doing so, they had found a bond stronger than any corporate goal. They had faced the ocean's darkness and emerged alive. But the deeper waters of their fears and connections would continue to define them.